Okay, so probably where I should start is, I was thinking about this for the last few days. Well, actually, since Dale mentioned it and then Vanderson was in my ear about it. I think there's kind of like maybe 3 stages of this. You know, there's that 40s to 50s, 50s to 60s, and 60s onwards. And I can only, this is something I speak for myself. When I turned 40, I thought it was 30. It was just a marker, you know, I'm 40, I'm 30. Until I hit about 44 and I injured myself. And up until that point, my injuries lasted a week, 2 weeks maximum. And then it was a year. And that really kind of spun me out because it took a long time to heal. And it seemed so insignificant, but it just wouldn't heal. And I had to think to myself, oh shit, here we go. And then the second time it happened was in my 50s. And when I got into my 50s, I realised one really important lesson, and that is, heed what I say. It's interesting to say something. There's another thing to actually do what you actually say. and one of those important things is rest. But when you get to 50, and this might sound bleak, and it might sound, you know, dark, but you get to 50, and one of the indicators, particularly after 50, is you realise the mortal coil is rolling out. You realise, well, the time is ticking. It's not up till you're 50. Everything before 50, you're going along at 100 miles an hour, and you think, yeah, everything's great. But you get to 50, and after 50, you start thinking these things because that coil is starting to unravel. It's not a bleak thing. It's a human thing. Understand? It's not something, oh, I feel like I've only got years to go. Yeah, you only got years to go, but it's probably 20 or 25 years to go. And that's how I see it. So at probably 60, I said, right, okay, I've got 20 years left, of which 10 of those years I'm going to be the same person I am now. And then the last 10 years, it's going to be a struggle. 5 years I'm going to be, and then the last 5 years, well, who knows? It's a flick of the dice from that point on. And that's, in a sense, how you should look at your training. You know, anyone in their 40s, you don't really have to think about it apart from the injury factors and the climbing incident factor. But we work in a system, this system, that is done under tension and pressure. And you all got to realise this. This is tension and pressure constantly. Even though we go, oh, we're going to do some free roll, it's not free roll. You're not free rolling because you're moving anyone from 60 kilos to 120 kilos. And if they're moving nice and easy, and you're moving nice and easy, that's fine. But if I'm 60 kilos and they're 120 kilos, it's still weight and pressure. And you've got to keep that in mind every time you do train. This is how I see it as a 60-plus-year-old. I have to think of that all the time. At 40, not so much. I'm going to roll with, say, Eldon at 40, not a problem. Whatever. But I know at 60, if I roll with Eldon, because we use Eldon as a benchmark of weight and technique, I have to be on my game 100%. Friday class or a Wednesday class, I have to be on my game 100%. Even though he has taken it easy, I have to think that way. But at the same side of this is if I roll with a white belt, I have to think that way as well. Because I don't have the luxury of rehabilitation at a limb. I won't get better fast, because I know that from 44 or 45, when I injured myself and it took a year to get better. I know it's going to be a slow process, depending on the levels of it. So what I came about was how I approach my game and how I teach my game. Because one of the most important lessons, I think, as you get further up the field, is teaching. Because teaching will teach you how to teach, how to examine what you're doing, but also you realise the differences of every one person. Like, for instance, if I roll with Adrian, and if I'm doing standing work with Adrian, I know he has 2 or 3 throws that he's going to do, and I can work with that. But I can't do that with, say, Caden, because his explosive technique is going to be 10 times faster, and I won't be able to keep up. Just won't be able to keep up. But when I learn and I teach that, I can break that down. And that's the important thing, is to break down your game. Because my game is going to be different from everybody else. You all have a signature to your game. My game is different from Vanderson's. He can explain his game perfectly, and I can explain my game perfectly because we teach it. And that's really, really important for the development. If you get stuck at that plateau where you think, I don't know, I'm stuck here and I don't know, whether I want to continue on or anything like that, grab someone from next to you and just start teaching them what you do. That'll pick it up, because your brain has to work, and that's really, really important. As you get older, you've got to keep your brain working. It's got to keep going, because otherwise you fall into those traps. Does that make sense, guys? Now, again, it's like there's certain things that I can do, well, I did in my 40s and 30s and 20s, that I'm just not going to do in my 60s. And it's not a criticism of the techniques, it's just I don't have the range that I had at 30s or 40s. I just don't. I'm not going to make it. So I'm not going to play an open guard because I don't have that range. And I don't have the speed or the dexterity anymore to do that. So if I'm rolling with Ian here, and I start doing a whole lot of things that I don't do, I can get away with it, because Ian has, we're similar age, he has that much room and that much space. But I'm not going to do that with, say, Conrad, because he only has to move 2 or 3 degrees one way at about 5% of the speed, and I'm going to be in pain. So you've got to, and again, it's not a criticism of that, it's just a time. You will find in your time, in your life cycle, that you will be able to do X, but not Y that you used to do. And that's the reality of it. And that goes back to that kind of idea of the mortal coil. It's a physical coil as well. There's only certain times you're going to be able to do that, and that's it. So how I approach this is, when I look at doing something, or when I teach something, and if anyone who's done my classes will know, I take the most fundamental things and I start with an entry, and then I will finish with the same thing, with a hold down or control. Because in my game, all I'm looking for is the control. I'm not interested in anything else. I want the control. Okay? Because everything else is 80, 90% experience. We roll, we learn, we do all these things. It's kind of semi-technical, but it's because it was under the pressure and you're moving, it's not quite technical. But when you get to the control position, that when things go, they stop. And that's where you start to really understand what's going on. Does it make sense to you guys? So when I'm in here, say if I am passing the guard, this is what I did yesterday. And everyone... So what I'm trying to do is I have 5 passes from this ground, and everyone knows them because they're all fundamentals, right? But I always want to start them the same way, because rote is a really important lesson to have, but you've got to also have an expression there. So I start with something every time. So it doesn't matter what those 5 passes are, I'm always going to start here, I'm going to lean, and I'm going to work that leg open on this side. I'm always going to start my 5 passes that way on the ground. Does that make sense? Because one, it's going to, people who are learning will understand it just by the fact that it's a rote situation. We start here, or we start here. The classic one of the old 90s was to start like this, and you work away. I start here, and I work. So he opens up here, I come up, I come into this position here, I secure, bang, pass, here. And now I've got control, and I relax and put the weight on. And that's where I'm going to fight. So the lesson is the same start, the same finish, but in the middle it will change. So again, if I start again from here, and I do the same thing to pass, here, he puts his hands on the knees, he goes to shift out to this side, I pass. Good? And then I come back into here, and I end the same way. So the start and the end are the same. It's just the middle that you have to think about. And by that process, and this is an age thing, by that process, I only have to worry about this middle section. Now in reality, when we're passing guard, it depends on the flavour of the month. If this was the 90s, I'd be thinking something, and if this was the early 2000s, I'd be thinking of something else. These days, it's you pass with the fear of getting leg locked or of that kind of nature, right? Back in the 2000s and the 90s, totally different ball game. It was in the 90s, if you were around then, it was lots of this kind of stuff, you know, or here, this kind of stuff.
Still works, by the way.
It still works.
It still works.
It still works. But it was a very much a 90s thing, late 90s. You know, people doing this kind of stuff because no one was worried about leg locks or anything like that, or bad triangles or what, because in those days it was arm bars, cross lapel chokes. And then at 2000s it all became, no one was doing this because you'd get triangle. And then everyone was triangling. So there's a kind of a history of it there. So when you're looking, well, when I look at this as an older guy, I'm always looking to do that kind of thing, where my brain is not having to think too hard and only have that middle section to do. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So the second thing I want to talk about really is, what are you good at? You ever thought of it? Sorry?
I'm the best tapper here.
Yeah.
100%.
Best tapper. If we brought knees into it and shin kicks, you'd be in there, wouldn't you? So, what are you good at? That's a stumbling question, isn't it? So, do you prefer offensive or defensive? Do you prefer triangles, arm locks, chokes, whatever, leg locks? What are you good at doing? Because if you find out what you're good at doing, and sometimes that happens in a kind of a natural way, like kimuras, for instance. Some people are really good at doing kimuras. So what you need to do is look at that thing that you like and then really hone into it. One of the things you learn in judo is 1 or 2 techniques, and you just keep drilling these things until it becomes some kind of sense. And it's the same way you should maybe look at your jiu-jitsu. If you look at a submission, like I only do 2 submissions. That's it. And the reason I only do 2 submissions is because the submission is only not even 5% of the game. You know, like, but in your mind, it's 95% of the game. Do you understand what I'm getting at? And as you get older, it has to be 5% of the game. It can't be 95% of the game, because then it means you're offensive. It means you're trying to get to this position, or trying to get that arm lock, trying to get that choke. And then that is the stumbling block between younger person, middle-aged person, and older person. An older person can't think that way. You just can't. You might like to think you can do it, but it's not going to work. So eliminate or minimize how much of those techniques you need to do. I do 5 passes, I do the 5 hold downs, I do 2 escapes for either of those hold downs, and then I have two submissions. I have 1 throw that I can guarantee every time that I can get from 4 different positions. That's my game. That's it. I have nothing else. And it's what the experience is to train with others and use my game as the tool to get them. And vice versa. Too many of you, I watch so much, your reaction. You're both, or 2 people are just reacting. And that's okay for being blue belt and purple belt. But once you get to brown belt, if I see somebody just reacting, well, that's not being a brown belt. And it's definitely not being a black belt. If you're just reacting, you're not being that grade. You have to go in there and you have to really focus on what your game is. Hence, what are you good at? And then you dictate that terms. It doesn't matter. If I'm rolling with Vanderson's only interest is his game and how to set up his game. You know, to a certain extent, he's going to play to everyone's level. We all do. But if I roll with Vanderson, I'm coming there with my game, and he's coming there with his game. Yes, he's going to go a lot slower because I'm older. I need a walking stick. But that's how it's done. So, what I'm good at is Jiu-Jitsu Katame, cross-body armbar, and I'm always looking for that. Yes, the chokes are nice, but I'm always looking for that. And I always plan that if I can control them, if I can put enough pressure on the person, then they'll make the mistake. And that's the difference between a younger player and an older player. Younger players are constantly sneaky little techniques, you know, like weaseling little things and making things up where they weren't there before. Hence, I think the leg lock game is a sneaky game. In the 90s, Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you know, anyone who did leg locks, they were excommunicated. You know, no one did foot locks. No one. And anyone who did, they get booed. You can see the Mundials back in the 90s and someone put a foot lock on it and there was just booing because it was considered, you know, bad. But now, everyone does it. And the legs are such an easy target. Throat, hardest target to get at. Arms, second. But feet, constant. You can go for feet all day because they're just there. They're not flexible, they're not movable, they're stuck, ankles are vulnerable. Does that make sense? So when I'm doing something and I'm in this position, I'm always looking to control the person to hunt for what I need to go for. In this case, it's an arm lock. But I'm going to go for the thing that he doesn't realise I'm going for, because when I do Jiu-Jitsu Katame, I can do it from 4 different positions and left and right. So when most people think of submissions, they think of a submission, I get a triangle on the right-hand side, or I get the triangle from an X position, or I get a triangle there. I don't get it on the other side, and I certainly don't get it from X, Y, Z. Does that make sense? So we all have submissions, but we have them in set places that we can and cannot do. Whereas I say I have 2 submissions, but I have them in 4 or 5 positions, that means I have 10 submissions. Does that make sense to you guys? Yes, it's the same submissions, but I have them in, you know, in 4 positions, in both sides, left and right. So that's a judo thing. That's really very much a judo thing, that I have a throw, but I can do the same throw in 4 different positions. Does that make sense? Okay, I won't talk too much, but I'm always looking for that. So if I'm here, I want to put as much pressure on his head and his neck and his chest as I can. I want to crush him. I want to take his soul. I just, I want to dangle it in front of him and laugh maniacally at him as he burns in hell. So that's what I'm thinking. That's where my brain is thinking right now. It's like, Caden, you did this, so now I'm going to pay, or you're going to pay. So from here, I'm always going to use as much of my hips as possible. I want to keep this area here as the movable area, and this area here as the controlling area. And every one of you know this. It's just I'm explaining it as a 60-plus-year-old, not a 50-plus-year-old or a 40-plus-year-old or anything. I'm talking about how I deal with it and keep my body in relative shape. So I'm here, and I'm going to move my hips and try and get my leg under his arm. Okay? I move my arms and come in here. Now, from this position, Caden's always going to start framing to work because he's been taught really well. Dubiously. But here. So I, in this position, am going to use my biggest weapon, which is that trunk, from my knees to basically my floating ribs. I want to use that in all times. So as you get older, that is your friend, is that position, or that movement. So as I come in here, I'm going to use my body to control that arm. And see what's happening? I'm using the control. Instead of trying to use my hand, which is weaker, I'm going to use my hip. So once I'm in this position here, and I'm coming over here. Now, who hasn't seen this? Put your hand up if you've never seen this before. Okay, that's 2. But everyone else has seen it. Why? It's because it's fundamental. How many people use it? Apart from that animal over there. Yeah. See? And why is that? Why don't you use it? Because all your intention is to attack from a position, and what you're after. How many people are successful with some side control position against somebody who is their own grade or above? Apart from Benison. Adrian. See, most of your intention is once you get to a position, you start attacking. When really what you should be doing is putting pressure on them to make mistakes. Is that right? Because you don't know, you can't fight. Fighting is not Jiu-Jitsu. Jiu-Jitsu is about thinking. It's not about fighting. If you come here to fight, well then, good luck. If you come in here to think, you're going to win. Because that's the important thing. So from here, I'm going to use my body to strengthen that position. Now I get it in, slide it in, and I'm in. Okay? It's as simple as that. That's all you have to do. Yes, Hodger Gracie said in an interview, he says, Jiu-Jitsu is really simple. It's just made hard because you've got to do it with other people. And it's true. It's really true. You can do so much, but because you have to do it with somebody else, that's the hard thing. And we're all really different, from tall, small, big, male, female. We're all different and we all apply it different. But if you keep to the fundamental principles, you're going to win, and keep it in your brain. And then as you get older, because again, it comes back to that age thing, that narrows. It does less. It doesn't do this. It does that. But what it does is it means that that period of, I know 2 submissions, but I can do them in multiple positions, becomes relevant to that structure. Yes, it narrows, but it narrows to a point, a fine point that can jab. Like that. And that's the important thing. I don't want to think while I'm here going, all right, I've got an Americana, cutting arm bar, he could push me back here and I could probably get a choke and da-da-da-da-da. If you're thinking like that, you've already lost the game. You've got to think, all I'm doing is putting lots of pressure on Caden. Now going to get more pressure on him. Get him to start holding his breath. Once he's holding his breath and he can't hold it anymore, every time he lets it out, I put my rib cage into his. He starts sucking in more breath, and you can see the veins. As soon as I see those veins, I go, God, this guy. I want his spinal cord, and I want it now. And I'm just going to sit there and wait until he starts doing yes. And everyone does it. Everyone goes, get me off my ribs. And then I move. And then he goes, he's going to go for the arm lock, and he starts moving again, and I get back underneath him again. And I sit there and control him, and then he gets to that position, how am I going to get around? He starts moving his legs, and I come back in. So it's not me being, using those little points of jiu-jitsu where you're clever and you're smart. No. Crush, maim, destroy. If you're a fan of 90s and 2000 movies, it's like crush, maim, destroy. If it bleeds, we can kill it. Things like this. And that's what you're kind of looking at in a sense as you get older is that crush, maim, and destroy. You've got to get every victory you possibly can while you can. Because they're like this point here, they're diminishing. And then once you get to the point where, oh God, I'm going to have to roll with Dave again. She's going to do that thing again. And you're just going to be, at that point you get demoralised. No. Win the victories first. And then anything after that, yeah. But I got the first one. You always go. But I got the first one,
Brian, can I kind of sum up what you're saying? Because I kind of have the same type of philosophy, right? But I think it's more about, for me, I try and think about the fundamentals and just never being out of position.
Yes.
Because if you're never out of position, the submissions just present themselves. Yes. Right? And if you use your weight and you're not expelling a bunch of energy and you're always focusing on the shape and the movement, all of the submissions, they just appear. Instead of hunting, I want that arm, I'm going to go for that arm and telegraph and burning energy. Yeah. So
I think that the one really important, in an evolutional style, like, I don't know if Vanessy thinks this way, because I think we all think differently, but when you start, it's kind of blue belt, you've amassed a good 80% of your game is around blue belt, that you've amassed it, okay? And then at purple belt, you have to really redefine what you've done. At brown belt, you have to start thinking, can I work both sides with this? And then at black belt, you better damn well know both sides of it. And it starts on a kind of it's always, it's a science of shape. That's how I see it. At black belt, you have to look at shape. And shape will give you an indicator of where things are. Like, for instance, if I'm in a ball, how do we break a ball? Well, we don't break balls. Ball doesn't break. So we have to look at things to open a ball. We have to open a ball. And so that's a shape thing. If I'm sitting here with my knees apart, I have effectively two triangles happening. These, the obvious, and this. So I know when I talk about base, I need to be in this triangular structure. Okay, I need this because this is the strongest point. Okay? If I'm on mount or taking the back, I know that I have to be a kind of a ball shape and holding on to them and keeping them close. Because most people, when they take a position, especially in an early stage, their either legs are very slack or their arms are very slack. They're holding very limply because they're not really structurally sound with their shape. Does that make sense to you guys? So squares, circles, triangles, really, really important when it comes to this kind of stuff, developing that kind of sense of understanding. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Right, well, I'm a black belt, I've been training for a while, but I train maybe once or twice per week, and every time I roll with Kieran, who's a black belt as well, but he's trained more times than me, he's younger, and always give him a hard time, he has more hair as well. So what's the advice, because it's hard for me, I always keep comparing myself to Kieran, because he's a black belt as well, and he's stepping me every roll.
Right.
What's your mindset of that when the comparison?
First off, if I was to look at it as a practical thing, or how I approach it is, and again, another lesson about training is I don't roll for a specific thing. So I'm not, when I roll, if I roll with Caden, we're talking about something specific and that I want to learn and understand. So I'm not going to sit there and just roll with Caden as just a normal roll. I want to learn something from it. So I go in there with the intention of, I'll suggest to him, let's do some setups for Koichi. And that's all I'm interested in doing. And in a sense, that is one way of looking at, continuously training with Caden. The second thing about doing that kind of rolling is that if I said to Caden, if I was rolling with Caden, I says, okay, we're going to roll, but we're only looking for jigitama. We're only looking for crossbody armbar. And then I have to make it, as a personal thing, I have to make it constructive. I can't make it about just rolling, because then my learning process is going to be limited by, in effect, defeat. Then I will always look at it as like, I'm going to roll with Caden, he's going to tap me out, and it's always going to be a struggle. No, I can't do that, because going back to that idea of mortal coil as well, you get to a certain age where you can't compete against younger people. You can't, and you shouldn't be able. You shouldn't go with an intention that I can beat somebody because I'm 10 years older and they're 10 years younger. You can't do that. It's
so
just...
I should not be upset?
No.
Okay.
But there's the top of the stairs. There's always the top of the stairs, and you get behind them and you put them down the top of the stairs. And that's always something. And you keep a bit of fear in the back of their minds. Says, Anderson's behind me.
Brian,
yes.
Can I just add to that too, as an older grappler as well, and training a couple of nights a week. So, like Brian, and my mindset as well is I can pretty much pick them all out here now. Now, Nick, if I can roll with Nick for 6 minutes and not get submitted and keep my defensa, that's a win for me.
Damn straight.
If I can roll with a younger blue belt and not submit, not get submitted in that. And these are the sort of things that we're looking at now, and keeping that mindset in there, because even though I'm a black belt, doesn't take away the fact that I'm going to tap out a blue belt who is 110 kilos, who has done wrestling. No, it doesn't work like that. There was a thing on the YouTube, I forgot the name of it, but it sort of weighs up your age compared to a younger person. So I think what I'm trying to say here for the younger ones like Caden, Daniela, and Jacob and them is that as you go through the ranks of a blue belt, as you go through the ranks of a purple belt, when I was a blue belt and then I came up to be a brown belt, watching the likes of their blue belts and purple belts, it's getting better and it's getting better. And you look at the white belts now, they're getting better and they're getting better. From when Conrad and I first started, that's the generation then. And you notice through the years, they're getting better, they're getting stronger. So as an older grappler, there's no malice in tapping out, You go there for your own health, my own health and well-being. I'll roll with anybody, but I'll roll with them within the limits that I can roll. If I get tapped out, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that because this is your own journey. So that's something for you to keep in mind as you go through the years in regards to this beautiful martial art that we're learning, because it's good for your mental health, but it's also good to understand that as well. As we go through it, blue belts, as you get up to brown belts, you're going to see the white belts coming up, and it's just going to, the level's going to keep rising. And that's just something that I've noticed over the years. And I was a white belt when I came here, and I look up to my mapua here, and you know, it's just amazing. So yeah, I just sort of wanted to add that in there.
I think that is what Dale's. You don't appreciate. Well, older people appreciate the fact that younger people accept us, and because it's a sad life. It's a sad life when you get older, and people stop appreciating you as you get older. And it's one of the great things about being in this academy, and is that people appreciate the fact that I'm actually here. And when you get older, that is the reason I still come, because I want to teach, but I teach because people appreciate what I teach, and that is it. Because I haven't done security for a long time, so I don't have to worry about abuse, physical violence towards me or anything like this. I don't have to think about that because I don't go out and I'm not interested anymore. And that has taken a whole lot of stress out of my life, the fact that I don't have to go out every week and be violent. It's great. And now I come to a place where no one's going to abuse me, and they're going to appreciate what I do. And as you get older, because every older person here is going to say how much they appreciate the fact that other people, or younger people in particular, dig their company. And that's worth $1 million. I'll have that over any jackpot, lotto, anything like that, any day. It's the fact that people appreciate me and they want the stuff that I want to impart. And if I can walk away with, at the end of my life, if that can be on the headstone, here was appreciated. That would be something I could live with, and I still live with it. That's probably at the end of what I've said now is the number one thing that older people come away with while they're training with all sorts of ages, is the fact that people appreciate them. That's really, really important. I mean, everyone should appreciate everybody else, but as you get older, it's the number one thing.
Can I just add, Brian is I'm guessing there's other 40-year-olds and whatnot, and I've just turned 40 this year. I'm quite lucky to have, Dale and Brian in this environment. Just speaking for you guys, I've been developing the Palmerston North combat room for a while now, but my development was through my rougher years, through my competition years, and so I know that environment that I was training then was putting off a lot of people. So people would come in around 35 to 40, take one look in and be like, stuff that, because it was quite a rough room. We've been blessed in the last, especially 3 years. We've had my co-worker who's 46. Good. Is he? Holy. He's 46, 43 when he started, and he first looked at it and he was like 120 kgs. He's down to 90 now. He had a poor lifestyle of doing other stuff, whatnot. But when he first walked in, really bad asthma, that's what it was. Used to be on a machine for sleeping and stuff. And we calmed everything down. We had this meeting, we're just going to make sure that people can pick and choose their roles, pick and choose if they're going to roll. I know there's not a belief in a lot of academies, if you get rounds and blah, 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 blah. But we actually found that we got more people staying around longer and retention for members when they could come in and not be forced to roll. They come and do the drills and whatnot, and then come roll time. Yep. And then over time now he rolls he gets all of the rounds in every single morning, and like I say, he's dropped the weight and whatnot. But because of himself being older and having medical problems and stuff like this, he actually got we've got quite a big fleet now of over 40-year-olds. And but I think, just kind of summing it up, that because of Dale and Brian understanding that age group, that's why you've got the ability for people to, you know, feel like they've got common ground in here as well.
Like I said, I can only speak for myself in the development of how I'm still going. Even though I had, you know, heart condition last week, the thing that I walk away with, and as Vanderson was talking about, you know, health markers, I look at them as well as emotional, mental, and spiritual markers as well. And they're kind of really important to lap into these things. When at certain points, I always kind of go, shit, I made it to 50, or shit, I made it to 55. And then I got to 60, I went, yes. And now I'm at, you know, coming up to 64, and I made it this far without really too much, you know, problems, apart from heart condition. But hereditary and blah, 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 blah. And I consider that absolutely a godsend, because I know so many people of my age, a year or two and a year or two younger, who are in the worst state, who are just messes, you know, just crumbling shells of people. You know, guys I know who are in their 40s who look like they're my age and shouldn't be my age. They're in their 40s. When I was 40, I was 30. That's how I looked at it. So again, going back to that thing of appreciation, it's knowing that people appreciate the fact that I'm here. And I appreciate the fact that they appreciate it. Because at the end of the day, you know, I can play table tennis. And if they all like me playing table tennis, I go and play table tennis. But I choose not to. Why? Because deep down inside there is a beast. there's a little animal that sits inside me who... and it sits there and it has claws, has incisors, has claws, yeah, and it's just constantly there. And no. I like to think about it that way, but anyway. But yes, go away with the fine, especially the older people here over the ages of 50, go away with thinking the fact that we will appreciate you being here. Not to say the younger people we don't appreciate it, and they're all, we appreciate the older people as well. Because in some cultures, older people are the teachers of our communities. And that's really important. There was a point in history, I think it was in 1955, that prior to 55, everything was linear. Your grandparents, parents, and children, they learnt in a linear sense. And then around the 50s, particularly 55, it went sideways. Then you had people worried more so about what my friends thought about. And we have that now. We have that in spades. I get really disheartened by certain things. And one of the things that disheartens me is the fact that my daughter can't go to her school because the girls in her school are so friggin' bad that she can't be there. And that really pisses me off. And then she in herself says, well, I love, you know, like, I want to go to school, but I can't because they're bullying her all the time. And it doesn't matter what I say to her. I say, I love you, Jacob loves you, TY loves you, all your family love you. Doesn't matter. Because that linear thing going sideways is really important in their development of their lives. And it absolutely sucks. Because anyone who has children knows what that is like. And it's bullshit, no. Absolute bullshit. And so when I come here and I get that appreciation, that fortifies my feelings of society, and particularly this part of the society and this community. So the strengths are there, as we choose to use them or not. Anyway, thanks. Thank you very much. thank Dale and Vanderson, particularly those two. I mean, Dale came up to me and came up with the idea. I said, yeah, I'll jump in. And then didn't think about it. And then Vanderson said, we're going to do it. And I went, oh, okay, shit. It's actually going to happen. So I have to appreciate these guys. Welcome so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Well, keep doing what you're doing. You know, in my older years, I would still come back and sit and watch. A good friend of mine in Adrian's, Pat Toner, he was in his 80s and he was still training. Pat was still training. He was a world champion at, what, 72, 73, won the worlds? He's still training, 70s. And in his 80s, he's still training. He's still doing things. He died when he was 87, something like this. He was still training. So there's nothing stopping anyone here from still training. And that's the important lesson. Anyway, thanks guys.